Leon had arrived at the Kadesh Frontier Research Station barely a month ago, armed with youthful optimism and a head full of groundbreaking ideas. He was in his late 20s, tall and lean with dark hair that curled at the edges, and he wore the inquisitive expression of someone who never stopped asking questions. The Kadesh Station itself was a place of improbable cohabitation. Humans, a few alien species tolerant of human curiosity, and of course a rotating cast of researchers from all corners of the galaxy who wanted to use the station's advanced facilities. Leon was assigned to the genetics lab, a labyrinth of high-end scanners, secure servers, and a constant hum of energy coursing through the floors. For him, this was paradise. He planned on making the most of it, using his short research tenure to dive into the mysteries of interplanetary biology. Despite the official guidelines forbidding the mixing of certain genetic materials, he found himself wondering, how far could a dedicated scientist push the envelope? He soon heard rumors about the Xanthians, an alien race known for their refined approach to genetic engineering. Nobody knew much about how they reproduced beyond vague hints that they relied on highly advanced gene synthesis pods. It was whispered that natural childbearing was almost unheard of for them. They were secretive, borderline xenophobic, and seemed uninterested in human alliances. Yet a few Xanthians occasionally passed through Kadesh Station on matters of trade or research. Leon had never expected to actually meet one, let alone form any real connection. But that changed when, one evening, in the near-empty genetics lab, he spotted a tall figure bent intently over a console, luminous data swirling around her like a pastel halo. She stood about Leon's height, her limbs elegant, with skin that shifted between subtle shades of pale lavender and pale gray. Her hair, if one could call it that, looked more like delicate strands of shimmering filaments, softly glowing with an internal light. She was dressed in a sleek jumpsuit with faint geometric patterns, the lines of her attire melding seamlessly with the shape of her body. When she noticed Leon's presence, she straightened, looking wary yet curious. Her eyes were the color of polished silver, large and mesmerizing. She introduced herself as Evelyn, and there was a distinct note of caution in her voice, as though she expected suspicion. But Leon was intrigued. He had never witnessed a Xanthian this close before. They began talking in polite half-whispers. There was no reason to hide, but both of them sensed an unspoken tension in the air. Evelyn told him she was here to examine a piece of scanning equipment that she claimed had malfunctioned. Leon offered to help, bringing up the device's operating system on his console, but soon realized everything was operating within standard parameters. "That's strange," Evelyn murmured. "My readings suggested it was broken. Perhaps something else is interfering." Leon asked if she was running tests on something in particular. She hesitated, then said she was merely updating her people's biological registry. It was a vague reply, but Leon didn't press. Instead, he studied her posture, the intangible aura of intelligence around her. She carried herself like a scientist, or at least someone intimately familiar with genetics. Even her slightest gesture seemed precise. As they conversed, it emerged that Evelyn wasn't just an ordinary Xanthian visitor. She possessed advanced knowledge of Xanthian biology, potentially the sort of knowledge that was restricted in many regions of the galaxy. When Leon innocently remarked that it was unfortunate humans and Xanthians could not engage in normal scientific collaboration regarding reproduction, she gave him a peculiar look. "We have laws," she said quietly, "and you have them too. Our societies have decided that the risks outweigh the benefits." He admitted he found that stance puzzling, especially for an era as scientifically advanced as theirs. Evelyn shrugged. "Xanthians prize control above all else. We were designed, engineered for maximum efficiency. Natural reproduction is considered an archaic hazard, so it's essentially forbidden among my people." Her voice was tinged with something that felt like regret, or perhaps it was curiosity. Leon recognized the spark in her eyes. She wasn't fully convinced by her own rules. But for that day, their conversation ended quietly. The following morning, Leon found himself thinking about her. He He recalled the subtle, shifting hues of her skin, the incisive tone in her remarks about gene pods, the fleeting tension in her posture. Could it be possible that she, like him, wanted to push past these social boundaries and see what lay beyond? He was drawn in by that possibility. They crossed paths more often in the days that followed. Sometimes, it was a brief exchange of data or a curt nod across the corridor. The entire research station was buzzing with activity. Traders from planets he'd never heard of were hawking goods in the commercial sector, while the labs thrummed under the weight of endless experiments. Eventually, he found Evelyn seated in a corner of the genetics lab again late one evening, reviewing slides of cellular structures. She seemed preoccupied. With gentle caution, Leon approached and asked if she needed any help. This time, she did not dodge. Instead, she motioned for him to sit next to her. "I've been studying your people," she admitted, gesturing at a swirling diagram of human chromosomes. "I mean, all of this is public data, but I wanted to see the details for myself. Your species has a surprising resilience in certain parts of the genome, especially regarding disease resistance and adaptability to different planetary environments." Leon nodded, acknowledging that humans had, through centuries of migrations, diversified in surprising ways. He wondered if he should mention something about the rumors that humans were biologically flexible compared to many other species, but decided against it. Instead, he waited. Evelyn hesitated, then confided that she suspected the Xanthian genome might carry hidden vestiges of natural fertility. "The official stance," she said, her voice dropping, "is that we haven't reproduced naturally for many generations. We rely on gene pods for everything, from embryonic development to ensuring specific genetic traits. But there are ancient legends, obscure records. They suggest a time when we were capable of biological bonding, like your species." Her gaze flicked to his face. "I shouldn't even be telling you this." Leon's mind flashed with excitement. If she was right, the scientific implications were enormous. It would prove that Xanthians were not so fundamentally different from humans that synergy was impossible. "We should investigate," he whispered. "We can keep it quiet. I have access to certain lab equipment." There was that spark again in Evelyn's eyes. For a moment, she seemed ready to leap at the prospect. Then fear overcame her features. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If the station authorities discover we're investigating reproductive compatibility, we'll be facing immediate sanction, perhaps even arrest. The official laws are quite severe." Leon swallowed hard, yet his rational side teemed with longing. The chance to rewrite biological truths, to break open taboo topics and explore new scientific frontiers, that was what had driven him to the Kadesh station in the first place. And if Evelyn herself felt curiosity, maybe even a personal stake in unraveling the secrets of her species, then they could combine their knowledge. Maybe there's a way, he offered, to do it under the radar. Nothing official, just private research. We wouldn't have to publish or risk the station's security. We just gather data. Evelyn's lips parted in a faint tremor, and her irises took on a deeper silver glow. "All right," she replied, almost reluctantly, "but we need to be extremely cautious. My presence here is already under scrutiny." That was how it began. Neither of them realized that they were stepping onto a path that would entangle scientific ambition with the uncharted territories of intimacy. For Leon, the lure of knowledge eclipsed everything else. For Evelyn, it was a chance to discover if her people's ancient histories were real, if an impossible future could exist, bridging human and Xanthian biology. They made covert arrangements. During the day, each pursued normal duties, taking care to avoid suspicious glances. At night, they would quietly meet in the lab, calibrating equipment. Evelyn brought encrypted data from Xanthian archives, documents referencing vestigial genes that might allow for spontaneous fertilization. Leon used his station clearance to access advanced scanning hardware. Their hearts raced with excitement. Two explorers on the brink of something unprecedented. For over a week, they gathered samples, hair, skin cells, bodily fluids. Under ordinary circumstances, running cross-species fertilization tests was strictly prohibited without a labyrinth of permits. But as the station's labs were well-equipped and often left unmonitored in the late hours, the pair had a window of opportunity. They discovered that xanthian cells exhibited extraordinary plasticity. Under certain chemical triggers, they could rearrange themselves to mimic the receptive structures found in more naturally reproductive species. Leon was astonished. If that pliability extended to real-world biology, the taboo around impossible reproduction might be shattered. Working so closely, they found their emotional defenses lowering. In the hush of the laboratory at midnight, the overhead lights dimmed, the faint hum of servers as the background chorus. They often spoke in hushed murmurs. Sometimes, they'd share a shy laugh over a small mishap, like a mislabeled sample or a fleeting glitch in the hollow interface. One day, as they stood side by side, peering at an intricate simulation, Leon found himself acutely aware of how close Evelyn's arm was to his. He could sense the warmth emanating from her. He noticed the gentle shift of color along her neck whenever she grew excited about a new data point. There was something undeniably magnetic about her presence. He told himself it was purely intellectual admiration, fascination with her culture, her knowledge. But as the days wore on, that self-delusion cracked. In their fleeting conversation breaks, Evelyn would share quiet confessions. How her people all but banned emotional attachment to other species, seeing it as a distraction from their carefully designed society. Leon, in turn, spoke of Earth's own turbulent history with intercultural prejudices, how alliances formed only after centuries of conflict. A sense of parallel resonated between them. On the surface, they were two scientists forging a dangerous path. But on a deeper level, they were two lonely souls who found common ground in the pursuit of something bigger than themselves. Late one evening, after successfully isolating a gene sequence that might permit embryonic binding, Evelyn allowed her shoulders to slump in exhaustion. She had been tense for hours, worried they might be caught. "I never thought I'd be doing this," she admitted. "All my life, the only guidance I received from the Xanthian elders was, do not deviate from the path." She shook her head. "But here I am, defying it all." Leon placed a hand on her arm in a show of empathy. It was the first time he'd touched her. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed as if deciding to let the moment stand. He murmured, "Sometimes defiance is the only way forward, especially if the rules make no sense." She gave him a tiny smile, one of those rare displays that made her entire face soften. In that instant, the quiet tension between them shifted. A swirling awareness existed in the lab's heavy air, and Leon made no move to pull away. Evelyn's skin was cooler than humans, but it felt strangely comforting, the texture smooth, the faint shimmering lines across her forearm glowing subtly. "We should finish the scanning," she finally whispered, as if forcibly reminding herself of their mission. Leon nodded, stepping back reluctantly, but the imprint of that small contact lingered in both their thoughts. The next day was a near disaster. Leon had neglected to fully cover his tracks in the station's system, leaving traces of unauthorized data queries. One of the security overseers flagged the unusual file searches. Leon was interrogated by a stern-faced officer demanding to know why the genetics lab logs were incomplete in a small-time window. Thinking fast, Leon blamed a glitch, claiming he was simply verifying calibration protocols. The officer didn't appear fully convinced, but had no concrete evidence of wrongdoing. After a tense hour, Leon was allowed to leave. When he finally met Evelyn that evening, his nerves still thrummed with adrenaline. "We have to be more careful," he told her. She agreed, face pale, fear dancing behind her silver eyes. They devised a plan: turn off certain lab sensors, hide their logs behind official-sounding maintenance tasks, and shift some experiments to a small side chamber that the station rarely used. The more they had to hide, the tighter their partnership became. They started confiding in each other about personal hopes and doubts. Leon confessed that, aside from wanting to push the boundaries of science, he found it increasingly difficult to be purely objective when it came to Evelyn. She confessed the same. One quiet midnight, they hovered over a set of newly spliced cells in a nutrient solution, pulses of faint luminescence indicating that some reaction was indeed taking place. They looked up at each other at the same time, speechless with excitement. That was the moment they recognized the potential for actual cross-fertilization between a human and a Xanthian. Probability was small, but not zero. The tension that had been simmering finally reached a gentle boil. They pressed closer. He felt the faint trembling in her limbs, a sense that she was poised between flight and surrender. "This is insane," she murmured, eyes shining. "If we get caught..." Leon raised a hand to her cheek. "I know," he said, "but it feels like we're on the brink of something extraordinary." Her skin under his palm was unbelievably soft, cooler than his own. The bioluminescent lines near her collarbone flickered with a subtle shift in color, deepening from a gentle lavender to something more vibrant. He realized it might be an involuntary response, like a blush in humans. They would have kissed, if not for a beeping alarm from the console. The lab scanners indicated a critical phase in their genetic combination test. Startled, they jumped apart and rushed to check the results. The cells had fused in the dish, at least. Partially. It was a mind-boggling outcome, the stuff of science fiction. And yet the sight of Evelyn's flushed features and parted lips haunted Leon far more than the miraculous data dancing on the screen. It was as though a new door had opened, one that would let them explore not just a scientific boundary, but a personal bond they could no longer ignore. That boundary was crossed a few nights later. After triple-checking that the station's sensor logs were scrambled, after verifying that no security patrols lingered nearby, they set about the next stage, real compatibility testing, which included measuring actual bodily responses if they tried to share each other's pheromones, hormones, and physical contact at a much more intimate level. Part of it was purely scientific. They needed to record if the Xanthian receptors could truly adapt to human enzymes. But they knew it was more than that. Neither voiced it aloud, for fear it would make them lose their nerve. They set up a small, clean area in the side chamber, a sterile environment with the necessary scanning instruments. Evelyn's expression flickered between nervousness and anticipation. She wore a light, form-fitting suit that allowed for easy sensor attachment. Leon felt his heart pounding as he arranged the monitors. The air tasted electric, humming with potential. When Evelyn's fingers interlaced with his, they both inhaled sharply. "Are we sure about this?" he asked, voice low. She answered by stepping closer, her arms sliding around his waist. He felt the cool press of her body, the faint glow swirling along her skin. He didn't resist. In that moment, any fleeting concerns about station laws or cross-species taboos receded into a distant background. Their lips met softly, tentatively, and he realized how unprepared he was for the flood of sensations that followed. His heart thundered in his chest, every nerve alive. Evelyn's biology seemed to resonate with his, as though she could sense the slightest shift in his breathing or pulse. The luminescent lines along her face and arms brightened, shifting through delicate patterns. He wondered if it was pleasure or a reflex triggered by the interplay of hormones. Whatever it was, it proved enthralling beyond measure. Her body pressed close, slender and strong, and he discovered that her kind had subtle differences in musculature, a fluid grace that felt both alien and intimate. They kept the lab instruments running, capturing data, changes in hormone levels, subtle shifts in body temperature, fluctuations in heart rate. At first, they tried to keep some scientific detachment, but it quickly dissolved. Their attraction was undeniable. The faint moans that escaped Evelyn were new to Leon's ears, and each sound sent shivers through him. He discovered that she responded to certain soft touches with intense trembling, as though the Xanthian body was newly awakened to an unfamiliar sense of desire. To Evelyn, it felt as if her entire world had pivoted. The sensations coursing through her body were more profound than anything her strict Xanthian background had ever allowed. Her species had strived to eradicate chaotic emotions, but now she could feel her own heartbeat escalate, her mind drowning in the intensity of closeness. They explored each other with reverence, no longer sure what was science and what was personal craving. The mild chemical barrier between them seemed to dissolve. Leon's warmth contrasted with Evelyn's cooler body temperature, creating an almost electric sensation where their skin met. She gasped softly, pressing her forehead to his. "I never thought this would feel so." She couldn't find the words. Leon brushed a trembling hand through the shimmering filaments of her hair. "I had no idea either," he whispered. "I only suspected there could be a new kind of connection, but I never imagined it like this." For a moment, the ethical and practical ramifications of their experiment were eclipsed by raw, mesmerizing passion. It was an act of discovery rather than mere indulgence. Every breath, every pulse of arousal that spread between them, threatened to rewrite what both humans and Xanthians believed was impossible. Under the sensor readouts, they confirmed that their bodies were reacting in synergy, the subtle interplay of hormones and cellular signals aligning. Evelyn felt her luminous patterns intensify whenever Leon's heartbeat quickened. He, in turn, grew intoxicated by a faint, sweet scent that seemed to emanate from her when she was aroused. The merging of their physiologies was not only feasible, it seemed surprisingly harmonious. The euphoria they experienced made them reckless in those final minutes. They forgot about the station cameras, the possibility that someone might notice the unauthorized lab usage. And so, it was that at the height of this shared bliss, an unexpected beep from the security panel signaled that an external observer was attempting to access the side chamber's cameras. They froze, panic surging through them. Scrambling off the medical cot, they hurried to shut down the power feed. In a flurry of movement, Leon managed to cut the video link. The danger sent a jolt of adrenaline through them, forcing them to come crashing back to reality. If the station saw them like this, they'd be finished, not just academically or socially, but very possibly facing serious legal punishment. Gasping, still reeling from the residual waves of sensation, they hastily put on their normal attire. "We have to purge the logs," Leon muttered. Evelyn grabbed the nearest console, her hands trembling as she worked to erase any trace of these events from the station's files. Meanwhile, Leon keyed in override codes to block remote access. After an agonizing few minutes, they managed to restore a semblance of normalcy. The sweat on Leon's brow and the luminous, shifting patterns on Evelyn's skin betrayed how close they'd been. In the aftershock of such intense intimacy, everything felt surreal, but the threat was real enough to overshadow their wonder. As they parted ways for the night, it was with the awareness that the walls were closing in around them. The next day, a security official named Commander Lutheran paid Leon a visit in the middle of the genetics wing. Lutheran was a tall, imposing figure with a face lined by suspicion. He demanded an explanation for the abnormal activity in one of the side chambers. There were fleeting power fluctuations and some missing security recordings, Lutheran said, eyes narrowed. "Want to tell me what was going on?" Leon feigned confusion. "I was investigating a hardware glitch," he lied, meeting Lutheran's gaze with what he hoped was confidence. "I turned off the cameras to avoid sensor feedback. The logs must have been corrupted because the software is old. I needed to do a manual reset." Lutheran's stare was ice cold. "We'll be keeping an eye on you. If you're dabbling in anything beyond station regulations, you'll be out of here before you can blink." Leon forced a disarming smile, trying to project the image of a dedicated scientist who might be absent-minded with technical details but not suspicious. When he was finally left alone, the weight of that interrogation sank in. If Lutheran kept sniffing around, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. Not only had Leon performed illicit experiments, he'd engaged in a highly illegal act of cross-species intimacy. He found Evelyn at the earliest opportunity. She was perched in a lesser-used corridor, leaning against the wall, an anxious look etched into her features. They retreated to the privacy of an out-of-service server room. Wires dangled from the ceiling, and only a dim overhead lamp cast flickering light around them. "They're on to us," Leon said bluntly. Evelyn swallowed, her alien eyes bright with fear. "I could sense that. I've been gathering my data backups. preparing to wipe them if needed. This is precisely why my people forbid such contact. It draws too much attention, too many complications. Leon pressed a hand over hers. Evelyn, we can't let them catch us. We've come too far. We're already seeing that our species can synchronize in ways no one thought possible. If that knowledge is lost, it'll be a tragedy for science and for... He paused, uncertain if he should say love. They hadn't labeled it yet, but it loomed over them like an unspoken truth. She understood. I feel it too, she murmured, voice trembling. It's not just a fleeting attraction. Something is changing in me. Even beyond the research, I can feel my body responding in new ways. Our contact sparked something inside me, and I don't mean just pleasure. Leon's eyes widened. His stomach flipped in a tumultuous blend of excitement and anxiety. Then we need a plan. We can't stay here. Evelyn nodded. There might be a place beyond the station's jurisdiction. If we slip away under cover of darkness, we can find a cargo vessel that runs along unregistered routes. We'd be fugitives, but at least we'd be free to continue investigating. And we wouldn't get thrown into a cell. The resolution in her voice sent a shiver through Leon. He realized how serious this was. He was about to forfeit everything, his official research position, his comfortable life. But the alternative was unthinkable. They agreed to slip out the next night. During the day, they acted as normal as possible. Evelyn kept her distance, while Leon put on a show of focusing on mundane lab tasks. Once darkness fell and the station's hustle calmed, they gathered what little they could carry. Encrypted data chips, a few personal items, essential gear. Leon forced himself to breathe steadily. He'd never defied authority to this extent. But as soon as he saw Evelyn waiting in the corridor, clad in practical gear, her face set with determined resolve, he knew there was no turning back. They skulked through deserted hallways, the luminous lines on. Evelyn's neck dimmed to avoid drawing attention, Leon's heart pounding with each step. At the docking bay, they bypassed standard clearance checks with stolen passcodes. They found a small supply vessel scheduled for a routine run to the outer colonies. The vessel's pilot, a surly old merchant who cared more about credits and formalities, agreed to take them, no questions asked, for a sizable sum. By the time the station's security system flagged them, the supply ship was already exiting the station's gravitational field. On a monitor, Leon glimpsed Commander Lutheran's angry face as an alarm blared. Then they jumped into FTL, leaving Kadesh Station behind in a burst of star-streaked darkness. He exhaled shakily, glancing at Evelyn. She was staring at him, relief and sadness mingling in her expression. They had done it. They were now fugitives, with no idea if they'd be hunted by the station authorities or possibly by Xanthian agents who viewed Evelyn as a threat to their carefully preserved genetic blueprint. But all that mattered in that moment was that they were free, at least temporarily. The cramped living quarters of the supply vessel provided little privacy, but they took turns sleeping in a small bunk, the hum of the engines lulling them into uneasy rest. When they arrived at the planet Doveran's Edge, a known hideout for those seeking to disappear among the fringe communities, the pilot dropped them off and sped away without ceremony. Doveran's Edge was a harsh desert world, dotted with sprawling canyons and wind-sculpted rock formations. The outpost settlement was little more than a scattering of domed shelters and a single marketplace. It was far from hospitable, but it was a place to vanish. Upon stepping onto the dusty ground, Leon shielded his eyes from the fierce sun. Evelyn did the same, the pale color of her skin seeming to shift slightly to adapt to the intense brightness. "We should find a place to stay," she said, voice tight, scanning their surroundings as though anticipating ambush. They rummaged for lodging and found a worn-down structure that served as a motel. The proprietor barely glanced at them before demanding payment in universal credits. Once inside the single, battered room, they breathed out in unison. This was no home, but at least it was shelter. The bed was rickety, the walls scuffed, but for the first time since their frantic flight, they felt relative safety. Evelyn sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing a hand to her abdomen. Leon, panting slightly from the heat, noticed her motion. "Are you all right?" he asked. She hesitated, then admitted, I'm experiencing sensations. My body feels strange, as though it's shifting. After that final session in the lab, the system readouts indicated a unique form of cell activation. I assumed it was a fleeting phenomenon, but now, I'm not certain. Leon crouched beside her, gently lifting her hand from her stomach. Could it be you're pregnant? The question hung in the dusty air. She allowed a shaky breath. Xanthians don't become pregnant in a natural sense. We don't have wombs like humans do. Our gene pods are external. But something's happening. Part of him thrilled at the possibility. Another part reeled with dread. Even theoretically, a cross-species pregnancy was near impossible. The ramifications, if it were true, would be enormous. Let's do a quick check, he murmured, fumbling for the portable scanner they'd brought from the station. It was smaller than the advanced equipment they had left behind, but hopefully enough to gather basic data. He activated the device, carefully passing it over her midsection. As it beeped softly, her face flickered with fear. For a moment, the screen showed jumbled lines. Then, gradually, it displayed an unusual set of readings, a pocket of tissue, alive with a swirl of mixed genes, forming a cluster that suggested some embryonic development. Evelyn's mouth fell open. Leon's hand trembled. Oh my God, he whispered. There's something. Evelyn stared in stunned silence at the little blinking shape. I can't believe this, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. My entire species forbids this. They say it's impossible. But here it is. Leon swallowed, realizing the scope of what they had unleashed. If the Xanthian authorities discovered her condition, they would stop at nothing to ensure it was contained, if not outright destroyed. Their relief at being away from Kadesh Station was tempered by the realization that neither the station nor the Xanthians would just let this go. The possibility of a viable cross-species child threatened the foundation of so many laws. Still, in that tiny, grimy motel room, the two scientists embraced, heads bowed together as they tried to process the miracle. That night, they spoke in hushed tones about what to do. They needed a place more permanent, safer, somewhere out of reach. Rumors suggested there was a hidden community on a more distant world, a place founded by rebels and exiles who had grown weary of oppressive universal mandates. It was not a paradise, but it might be a sanctuary for people like them. The journey to that hidden colony began with discreet inquiries in the outpost marketplace. They had to avoid official starports, so they paid a smuggler to ferry them to a remote coordinate known only to a network of outcasts. The smuggler, an amphibious alien with a slick grin, asked few questions, but he drove a hard bargain. Leon parted with almost all their remaining credits to secure the passage. Evelyn, meanwhile, kept her eyes peeled. She felt weaker some mornings, the swirling patterns on her skin flickering unpredictably. Each time Leon asked if she felt ill, she admitted a growing sense of fatigue and odd pressure in her abdomen. Neither was sure how a natural pregnancy would progress in a Xanthian body. If she required advanced medical care, they had no guarantee of finding it in lawless territory. They reached the hidden colony at last, deep in uncharted space. It wasn't marked on any official star maps. The planet, known to its inhabitants as Haven's Rift, was a lush, mountainous world with thick, humid forests and sprawling valleys. Built into these valleys were small communities of renegades, refugees from strict systems, political dissidents, or simply those seeking a life free of too many regulations. Before they could land, a group of heavily armed locals scanned their ship, suspicious of newcomers. Leon and Evelyn were hauled before a council that demanded to know their purpose. Evelyn mustered all her composure, explaining that they were fugitives seeking shelter. She didn't mention the pregnancy outright. Sensing their sincerity, the colony council relented, allowing them provisional membership. Their new home was little more than a crude cabin perched at the edge of a forest. But the air was fresh, the nights filled with stars, and no one asked invasive questions. They settled into a tenuous routine. Leon bartering help in the local clinic in exchange for supplies, Evelyn sharing limited knowledge of Xanthian biotech, but staying quiet about her specific research. Sometimes they felt the presence of watchful eyes, as though the colony's inhabitants weren't fully convinced of their innocence. Weeks passed, and Evelyn's changes grew undeniable. Her slender abdomen showed subtle rounding, and her energy levels fluctuated. Instead of morning sickness, she experienced sporadic dizziness and heightened sensitivity to sunlight. The portable scanner confirmed the embryonic cluster was thriving, apparently forming some hybrid structure that resembled neither a standard human fetus nor anything purely Xanthian. It was an unparalleled phenomenon, one that left Leon both awed and terrified. The nights turned into reflections of uncertain hope. They would lie on a makeshift bed in the wooden shack, listening to the distant chirps of nocturnal creatures, whispering about the future. Sometimes, Leon would brush a hand over Evelyn's stomach, feeling the faint stirring beneath her skin. They were forging a family in the shadow of universal prohibitions. Despite the tranquil surface of Haven's Rift, trouble brewed. One of the colonists, a wiry man named Arlon with a knack for hacking, mentioned that a substantial bounty had been placed on a rogue Xanthian female and her human accomplice on multiple networks. Word was the Xanthians were offering significant credits for information. Human authorities, too, had listed them as persons of interest. The combined threat pressed in. If a bounty hunter or a desperate colonist decided to turn them in, it could be catastrophic. Evelyn clung to Leon, fighting waves of anxiety, each episode threatening to derail her fragile health. Leon worried the stress might harm the developing child. They had come so far, only to remain one slip away from capture. It wasn't all despair, though. The colony had its share of idealists, individuals who believed in forging new paths free from the shackles of tradition. Hearing even a whisper of cross-species pregnancy, a few sympathetic souls rallied to hide Evelyn and Leon from any prying eyes. A seasoned midwife named Kalira, once exiled from her home planet for practicing alternative medicine, took a cautious interest in Evelyn's condition. She offered a safe location deeper in the forest, a small clinic hidden by thick trees and vines. With Leon's help, Kalira established a rudimentary but functional environment to monitor Evelyn's progress. By the time they relocated there, Evelyn was showing even more noticeable signs of pregnancy, a gentle swell that defied Xanthian norms. The greatest test came when an unidentified patrol ship was spotted hovering near the colony's outer perimeter. Reports suggested they were scanning for Xanthian biosignatures. Fear gripped everyone. The council demanded answers from Leon and Evelyn, certain that their presence had drawn unwanted attention. Desperate to protect themselves, Leon insisted they had no intention of exposing the colony. But some of the colonists thought it best to hand them over to the patrol to avoid trouble. Tension skyrocketed. Kalira stepped in, pleading with the council, pointing out that Evelyn was carrying a child that symbolized a possible new chapter for the galaxy, a living testament to unity rather than division. If we sacrifice them, she argued, we stand for nothing. This colony was built on the premise of refuge for all. Let's not betray that. In the end, the colony decided to stand together. They scrambled to erect sensor jammers, hiding Evelyn's presence. Leon helped modify small drones to create phantom signals in a different sector of the forest, luring the patrol ship away. For a tense day and night, armed colonists prepared to defend the settlement. It was a small miracle that the patrol ship never set foot on the ground. Possibly tricked by the false signals, it vanished into the sky. No one knew if it had actually given up or planned to return, but the immediate danger passed. In the aftermath, as relief flooded Haven's Rift, Evelyn went into what passed for labor, though that term felt inadequate for what she experienced. Late at night, she woke with sharp pains coursing through her body, and the luminescent lines on her skin pulsed erratically. Leon rushed to her side, supporting her as Kalira prepared a makeshift birthing area in the clinic. The entire colony seemed to hold its breath. The next hours were a blur. Evelyn's physiology didn't follow the typical patterns of a human birth. Her form seemed to shift at times, as if her body was manually rearranging its structures to accommodate the emerging life. She clutched Leon's hand through every wave of pain, eyes wide with shock, yet anchored by his unwavering presence. At last, the small hybrid child emerged into the world, a delicate being with human-like limbs but faint luminescent patterns dancing across its smooth, pale skin. The child's eyes were a soft, grayish lavender, opening for the first time with uncanny awareness. Leon felt tears well in his own eyes, surpassing every rational thought. Even Kalira, who'd seen countless births, stood transfixed. Evelyn, drenched in sweat and trembling, reached out to cradle the tiny form. The child's faint glow seemed to reflect the love and relief in the room. No one knew what the future held for this newborn or for the parents who had defied the laws of two worlds. But in that wooden clinic on a hidden planet, a hush of awe enveloped them all. Some colonists cheered quietly. Others watched from a respectful distance, uncertain yet profoundly moved. Leon and Evelyn, arms around each other, realized that their improbable journey had forged something beautiful and alive, a testament that the barriers once deemed absolute could crumble in the face of true connection. Even if the galaxy would eventually come seeking them, that moment was theirs. Their gaze fell upon their child, seeing in its luminescent pattern every possibility they had dared to dream. In the days that followed, the colony rallied around them. A few colonists grumbled about the risk it brought, but many others marveled at the infant's resilience. The child's quiet coos filled the forest air, a gentle symphony of life that reminded everyone of what they protected. The baby's presence, so fragile and yet so symbolically powerful, injected renewed purpose in a haven's rift. Leon could hardly tear himself away from the tiny being. Each day brought new discoveries. The child's skin glowed a bit brighter at dawn, as though attuned to the planet's day-night cycle. Evelyn monitored her own changes. Her body still seemed to be in a state of post-birth adaptation, the luminescent lines evolving in hue and pattern. Meanwhile, Leon recorded as many observations as he could, carefully encrypting them to prevent detection. Rumors spread throughout the colony of this miracle baby, though Leon and Evelyn preferred to keep a low profile. They sensed that sooner or later, outside forces might find them. But instead of living in constant fear, they used each moment to strengthen bonds with sympathetic settlers. They even confided in a few key figures about the larger significance of what they'd done. Perhaps, in time, bridging species might become more acceptable or at least less taboo. But for now, they remained watchful. One afternoon, as Leon held his child, the baby's tiny hand curled around his finger, eyes gleaming with that strange silver lavender color. Evelyn sat beside him, exhausted but content. Their gazes met, brimming with a love that transcended the improbable circumstances of their meeting. "We set out for knowledge," Leon whispered, "but we ended up finding so much more. I never expected." He trailed off, and she nodded, completing the thought in her own way. "I never believed I'd break my people's highest law, or that it would bring me something so precious. But I'm not sorry." Her voice was steady, yet thick with emotion. They recalled the intense wave of pleasure that first night in the side chamber lab, the swirl of hormones and desire that had seemed overwhelming. It had been a scientific quest, sure, but it also awakened them to deeper truths. No matter what rules had been placed upon them, love, or even a raw, genuine connection, could blossom in places no one predicted. That was the quiet message their child now symbolized. Over time, the colony's daily rhythms resumed. People hunted, gathered water, traded supplies. Leon and Evelyn contributed by providing unique genetic insights to help some of the colonists grow better crops or manage their illnesses. Kalira's clinic, with their help, became more advanced. Yet the specter of discovery loomed. One night, a radio transmission hinted that a heavily armed cruiser was scanning nearby systems. The colonists braced themselves again, but the cruiser never appeared above Haven's rift. Maybe it was a false alarm, or maybe the jammers worked. In a strange way, Each near miss emboldened them. They were forging a life of constant vigilance, but also unbreakable unity. Whenever the baby dozed off, Evelyn and Leon would sit by the glow of a lantern, reacquainting themselves with the data they'd gathered. It was staggering, proof that humans and Xanthians shared deeper biological roots than either side admitted. Proof that with the right chemical environment, natural conception was not only feasible, but could yield a thriving child. "We should find a way to share this with the galaxy," Leon murmured one evening. "So many conflicts revolve around the idea that different species can't intermingle. If people knew, maybe it would open minds." Evelyn's expression was complicated. "I share your hope, but imagine the danger. Governments might exploit it, or try to replicate our results under inhumane conditions. Or they try to wipe out any record that we existed to keep society stable." Leon sighed. "So we bide our time." Their days settled into a delicate routine. Evelyn's postpartum recovery revealed the remarkable regenerative nature of her Xanthian genes. Where a human mother might need weeks of rest, Evelyn's body seemed to adapt swiftly. Yet she remained mindful that everything about her new state was uncharted territory. The child grew, showing early glimmers of advanced sensory awareness, turning its head at subtle forest sounds. Leon joked that their baby might outsmart them both someday. He recalled the swirl of pleasure they first experienced in the lab, a melding of bodies and hearts. Now, that memory was overshadowed by something deeper, a devotion to the fragile life they'd created. The colony quietly embraced the presence of this new family. Skepticism still lingered in some corners, but over time, hearts softened. A few rebellious scientists or doctors among the outcasts found themselves enthralled by the newborn, offering small suggestions for care. In turn, Leon and Evelyn cooperated, never fully revealing all the data, but giving enough to build trust. Their story spread by word of mouth, an impossible child, born from a union that was never meant to happen. It stirred wonder and caution in equal measure. Their idyll couldn't last forever. One warm afternoon, while Leon worked on calibrating a water purifier and Evelyn fed the child inside the cabin, an alarmed colonist burst through the forest. "Ships sighted," he gasped. "At least 2 of them, circling the outer atmosphere. They're scanning." The settlement erupted in a flurry of action. People shut down electrical systems, hoping to mask energy signatures. Others grabbed weapons or scrambled to hide anything of value. Leon and Evelyn exchanged anxious looks. Could it be the same squad that tried to find them at the other colony? They quickly prepared to flee into the forest if necessary. Kalira rushed to them, urging them to seek shelter in an underground hollow that the colony used in emergencies. The child, sensing tension, began to whimper softly. Evelyn tried to soothe it, heart hammering. Leon readied a minimal go bag with their encrypted data. Moments later, the sky above rumbled. Everyone froze. Then the rumbling passed. The ships did not land. A scout confirmed they drifted away after a few passes, possibly deterred by the jammers. The entire colony exhaled in relief, though no one doubted they would be back. This cat-and-mouse pattern wore on them. Yet each day, Leon and Evelyn found new strength in the small family they had become. Every little coo from the baby, every shift in its luminescent patterns, reminded them that they had accomplished something miraculous. Their union was more than a fleeting moment of shared desire. It had started with a taboo experiment, culminating in a synergy that defied 2 societies' rules. So while the galaxy might hurl threat after threat at them, they would not trade their child for any measure of safety. One quiet night, with the baby finally asleep, Leon and Evelyn found a rare moment to be alone together. They sat outside the cabin under the alien constellations, the forest's chirping creatures filling the silence. Leon placed an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. He recalled the sensation of her lips in that clandestine lab, the adrenaline and delight. Yet now, their bond felt infinitely richer, no longer overshadowed by secrecy alone. "We said we did this for science," he murmured softly. "But it's really about us, isn't it?" Evelyn nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. Her luminous lines glowed faintly, pulsing in a steady rhythm. Yes, it's become about us, about everything we never thought possible. There was no more fear in her voice when she spoke of their union, only quiet acceptance and a fierce love for the life they had created. They kissed under the stars, the gentle press of their mouths a reminder of how far they had traveled, literally and metaphorically. Their passion, while still potent, had evolved into comfort and trust. The raw, explosive urgency they once felt in the station lab had matured into a deeper sense of unity. Perhaps that was the true outcome of their experiment, a genuine, enduring bond. When they returned inside, the child stirred, eyes flickering open. The pale glow across its skin made the shadows dance on the cabin walls. Leon lifted their baby in his arms, marveling at how something so small could hold such immense importance. Evelyn watched them, and for a fleeting moment, the memory of her old life among the Xanthians felt distant. She recalled the instructions hammered into her from childhood, that emotions were a liability, that all aspects of reproduction should be clinically managed in gene pods. Now, standing in the gentle glow of a single lantern, she knew she could never return to that worldview. She had discovered both the pleasure and the profound meaning that came from forging a bond with another soul, even if it belonged to a different species. Eventually, she approached Leon, touching the baby's tiny hand. The baby cooed softly, staring up at them with wide eyes. "I used to believe that we Xanthians had achieved perfection," Evelyn whispered, "but we simply closed ourselves off from the beauty of chance." Leon nodded, feeling that her words carried an undeniable truth. The entire point of scientific exploration was to reveal new mysteries. If the galaxy's laws tried to stifle that exploration, perhaps it was those laws that needed rethinking. Days bled into weeks, the tension never vanishing but settling into the background hum of potential danger. They discovered that caring for a hybrid infant posed unique challenges. The baby required certain minerals and vitamins that neither a pure human nor a pure Xanthian diet provided. They improvised, blending nutrient solutions from local plants with what remained of their scientific supplies. Sometimes the child's body temperature spiked unpredictably, prompting Evelyn's luminous lines to glow bright red as she tried to calm it. Leon scrambled through his notes, diagnosing issues, adjusting feeding intervals. It was an exhausting process, but love fueled their determination. At times, Evelyn felt pangs of longing for the advanced technology of the station's lab, for the sophisticated care that might have eased their burden. But she knew that returning to that environment was impossible. They'd be seized, studied, or worse. Instead, she poured her intellect into making do with basic tools, forging small breakthroughs each day. Kalira marveled at how quickly they adapted, how deeply the pair understood each other's strengths and weaknesses. "I don't think I've ever seen such devotion," she remarked once, watching Leon hold the baby while Evelyn scoured the forest for a certain medicinal herb. When the child was about a month old, Evelyn noticed a new development. The baby's skin glowed brighter whenever Leon came near, as though reacting to his presence. It was reminiscent of the synergy they'd felt during their first intimate moment. She recorded it meticulously, uncertain whether it was a purely emotional response or if there was a biological foundation, some cross-species bonding mechanism. The discovery, though small, reaffirmed for both of them that they had not made a mistake. Their child was thriving, showing signs of advanced reflexes and possibly heightened awareness. But the threat of the outside galaxy still loomed. On more than one occasion, scouts or bounty hunters probed the region. The colony hunkered down, weathering each intrusion. Finally, in a display of cautious optimism, the council decided to bolster the settlement's defenses. They constructed more robust shield generators, improved camouflage fields, and assigned watchers to vantage points across the valleys. In some ways, the presence of Evelyn, Leon, and their child galvanized the colony. Most inhabitants believed that protecting such a rare family was a moral cause worth risking conflict. On an evening that smelled of damp leaves and carried the chirping of nocturnal insects, Leon and Evelyn took their child to the edge of the settlement, gazing at the horizon. They had come so far from the sterile corridors of Kadesh Station, from that first timid conversation beside the lab console. The living embodiment of their journey, this small, radiant baby, slumbered peacefully in their arms. And in that hush, with the wind brushing through Evelyn's shimmering hair filaments, they felt a profound sense of calm. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together. Reflecting on how it all began, Leon remembered the nerve-tingling brush of Evelyn's lips, the heart-stopping rush of that first union which had blurred science and personal longing. Their pleasure had not merely been physical. It was the catalyst that shattered preconceived notions, that dared them to dream of a reality beyond the constraints hammered into their minds by two rigid societies. If anyone asked, they might say it was foolish or reckless. But in these stolen moments of peace, with their child's delicate luminescence lighting up the darkness, they knew it had also been beautiful and perhaps necessary. Over 4 months after they fled Kadesh Station, rumors surfaced of a massive political shakeup. Certain factions within both human and Xanthian leadership had begun to question the absolute restrictions on cross-species genetics. Some whispered that data from an unnamed source had circulated, showcasing partial evidence that a stable hybrid might be possible. Leon and Evelyn didn't know if their work had somehow been smuggled out or if other radical scientists were finally stepping forward. But the news bolstered their hope that one day they wouldn't need to hide in the shadows. Until then, they remained in the hidden colony, forging a life that was at once precarious and meaningful. They helped cultivate new methods of producing food, aided in local health care, and quietly taught those they trusted about the wonders of integrated biology. Their child, as the weeks turned to months, grew stronger and more alert. They bestowed a name upon the baby that blended elements of both their languages. Each time they spoke it, the baby's luminous patterns flickered happily, as though recognizing the love imbued in each syllable. The echoes of that first experiment in the lab never fully faded, for it was there that they discovered how two distinct beings could meld in body and spirit. The delight and closeness they experienced had spurred them to set aside logic and caution in favor of truly living. Even in the day-to-day challenges of survival, they revisited that sense of unity whenever they touched, whenever they exchanged a tender embrace. Such intimacy reminded them that their mutual desire wasn't a mere byproduct of scientific curiosity. It was a spark that made them a family. One night, as they tucked the baby into a makeshift crib carved from local wood, Leon caught Evelyn's gaze. Her silver eyes shone with quiet contentment. He brushed a strand of her glowing hair behind her ear and leaned in. Their kiss was gentle, warm with the memory of obstacles overcome. She rested her forehead on his, heart full. "We'll keep adapting," she whispered. "You and I, we're living proof that life finds a way, no matter the rules." He nodded, hugging her closer. He remembered how the station's authorities once nearly discovered their secret, how close they'd come to having their entire project erased. Standing here, free if precarious, they realized that their rebellion had birthed something far more precious, a new perspective on the boundless possibilities of life. Their love had begun in a sterile lab, blossomed among gene sequences and mechanical hums. It had turned forbidden, transforming from an intellectual pursuit into raw physical ecstasy, and then into a deep emotional bond. And it had led them to this strange sanctuary, living on the margins, raising a child who defied centuries of taboo. Perhaps one day, when the colony was safer or the laws had softened, they would venture forth with their child, showing the universe that the lines drawn between species were illusions that could be transcended. Until then, they would remain vigilant, leaning on each other's strength. They would take pleasure in stolen moments beneath the forest canopy, the gentle hush of leaves around them, their fingers intertwined as they remembered the dream that started it all. Yes, it had been an experiment, one that tested the boundaries of genetics and social edicts. but it had also become a proof of the power of genuine connection. In the quiet serenity of their cabin, each day they found new layers of devotion. They lived not just for themselves, but for their child, whose luminous skin told a story of hope, of two worlds, bridging in the name of love, and of the extraordinary joy that could arise when brave hearts dared to break the rules. And so their tale continued in the hush of starry nights and the glow of a baby's luminescent skin, a testament to the simple truth that pleasure, curiosity, and love could shape a future no one had ever imagined. It was a quiet voyage at first, or so Captain Kessler believed, as the Xenorian scout frigate, known as the Aurora's Wing, drifted across the desolate starfield. Despite the ship's name suggesting a peaceful, shining aura, the vessel itself bore multiple scars from recent battles. Its plating had been ripped apart by a brush with hostile raiders, and the port engine was running at half capacity. Within the main command deck, Captain Kessler, a tall Xenorian with a crest of iridescent feathers running along her avian-like skull, stood with her four-clawed hand pressed against a damaged console. Everything felt tenuous, like the thin hull plating was all that kept her people safe from the void. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Krutha, who possessed a more subdued plumage, leaned over the communications terminal, scanning for any flicker of friendly signals. The Xenorians were a proud people, descendants of a species that had once soared beneath the endless skies of their homeworld. Evolution and technology had carried them into space, but they had never lost their innate sense of caution. Their culture demanded that a warrior must always feel connected to the vessel that carried them. As such, they used physical control panels, mechanical switches, and direct haptic feedback. Many outsiders called their tech style outdated, but to Xenorians, it was a sacred tradition. Something flickered on the display. Lieutenant Krutha glanced up, anxious. "Captain, I'm picking up an unusual transmission. It's faint, modulated in a way I've never seen before." Kessler raised a brow ridge. With a subtle flick of her wing-like arms, she indicated for Krutha to route it through the main speakers. A low hum and crackling static filled the deck, followed by a voice they could scarcely understand. At the edges of the transmission, an automated translator tried to piece it together, but it never formed a coherent message. It was simply alien. Kessler exchanged uncertain looks with the others stationed at the deck. They had heard legends of lost star nations, scattered enclaves, and even rumors about a species called humans. On the far edges of Xenorian territory, stories drifted in about humans possessing ships the size of small cities, with unstoppable firepower. Yet no first-hand accounts ever reached the Xenorian Council in verifiable form. Most of the crew dismissed them as myth. Still, with the Aurora's wing battered and in need of supplies, Kessler considered the possibility of investigating this signal. She had no other leads, no starbase to dock at, and minimal resources to repair her ship's structural breaches. She convened a brief council with her key officers. Old tech priest Nowell, feathers dull with age, insisted that they must remain wary of any unknown transmissions that could be a trap. Krutha argued that they had few options. They had to find help somewhere, even if it meant taking a calculated risk. Junior Communications Officer Mert, whose bright orange crest indicated youth and inexperience, looked hopeful. He had always been fascinated by stories of species beyond the usual trade routes. Kessler tapped the console in front of her, hearing the reassuring click of mechanical toggles. "We set a course for this signal," she said, eyes scanning the battered readout. "But remain on high alert. I'll not lead us into danger unprepared." The engines shuddered as the Aurora's wing veered in the direction of the mysterious coordinates. For hours, they drifted across that quiet sector of space, power cells draining slowly, medical staff tending to wounded from the previous battle with raiders. Meanwhile, the faint transmission grew stronger. Patterns emerged, though they were still incomprehensible to the Xenorians. Kessler felt a mixture of cautious hope and uneasy tension. Perhaps the myths of unstoppable starships were simply exaggerations. Perhaps they would find a small outpost or a neutral station willing to trade in good faith. Not long after, the ship's sensors picked up a contact. "Captain," crew murmured, "I've got a reading." It's a small craft, bearing the signature of that same transmission frequency. It's coming straight toward us. Kessler gave the order to bring the Aurora's wing to a stable drift. The entire crew felt the hum of the engines decrease. Everyone was on edge. External cameras showed a sleek vessel of unfamiliar design sliding into view. It had a metallic hull with angular lines unlike the more organic shapes favored by Xenorians. Curious, the Aurora's wing maintained an open channel, but all they received at first was static. Then a new voice broke through. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Lane of the Starbound Arrow, representing the United Earth Stellar Command. We read your position. Are you in need of assistance?" The translator struggled for a moment, but soon the words came through in the Xenorian tongue, albeit with an odd accent. The entire bridge crew froze. Kessler blinked. Humans? The name was so bizarre and yet oddly familiar, as though whispered in half-remembered rumors. She responded carefully, stepping closer to the communication station. "I am Captain Kessler of the Xenorian ship Aurora's Wing. Our vessel is damaged, our supplies depleted. We seek no conflict." A tense pause followed. The alien voice responded with calm clarity. "No conflict intended. We're scanning your ship, picking up severe hull damage and compromised environmental systems. We can escort you to our primary vessel for aid if you so choose." "Primary vessel," Kessler echoed, meeting Kruth's eyes. She recalled the old stories of human ships of impossible scale. But it was only a rumor, right? She swallowed her apprehension and switched on the direct comm. "We accept your offer. Though we warn you, we are not in a position to defend ourselves further if this is a trap." Lane's voice returned, sounding oddly kind. "Understood, Captain. Prepare to follow our NAV beacon. I assure you, we mean no harm." With that, the small craft angled away, leading the Aurora's wing deeper into an uncharted region. The Xenorian crew maintained full alert status. Tech Priest Nalal-paced near the backup systems, eyeing every fluctuation with suspicion. Lieutenant Crew conferred with the gunnery crew, though their few working beam turrets wouldn't stand a chance against advanced foes. They were effectively at the mercy of these humans. After several hours of cautious travel, the moment arrived. Kessler stood at the forward viewport, tension knotting her shoulders. A sensor alarm chimed once, then the sight resolved on the large overhead screen. In the darkness of space, an object emerged, illuminated by distant starlight and the faint glow of engine thrusters. It stretched far beyond anything Kessler had ever imagined, overshadowing the Aurora's wing with a silhouette so massive it seemed like a moving station. She could just make out surface details, plating upon plating, turrets the size of entire Xenorian shuttles, rows of hangar bays that glowed softly. It was simultaneously awe-inspiring and utterly terrifying. Her heart pounded in her chest. She heard a soft gasp from Crew, who whispered, "Great skies, that's not a ship. That's a floating city." The comm crackled again. "Captain Kessler, you are approaching the UNSCS Resolute Dawn, a battleship of the United Earth Stellar Command. Transmitting docking coordinates now. Please follow the guidance beam." The Xenorians exchanged uneasy looks, but Kessler steeled herself. They had come this far. The Aurora's wing, battered as it was, followed the ghostly green beam of light that emanated from the battleship. The docking port they approached seemed like a yawning canyon. Giant doors slid open to admit them, revealing an internal hangar spacious enough to house half the Xenorian fleet. Even in its battered state, the Aurora's wing felt compelled to present itself with dignity as it floated into that enormous cradle. Gravity fields adjusted smoothly, locking them into place. For a moment, no one spoke. The spectacle had stolen their words. Kessler's breath caught in her throat. Every sensor reading pointed to an almost incomprehensible power output from this monstrous ship. She suppressed the tremor in her voice and instructed her crew to power down the weapons. Fighting here would be like an insect attacking a mountain. The docking arms reached out, locking onto the Aurora's wing with a soft mechanical hiss. An automated voice, clearly processed through a translator, sounded over the intercom. "Welcome aboard the Resolute Dawn. Please stand by for pressurization and atmosphere equalization." Kesser, swallowing her nerves, ordered a small landing party to accompany her onto the human vessel. They had suits if needed, but it seemed the environment was being adapted for them. She moved through the corridors of her own ship, encouraging each member to hold steady, trusting in her leadership. Crew then insisted on joining, as did Tech Priest Nowell, eager to keep an eye on any form modifications. So they gathered at the airlock, a handful of avian-like Xenorians with uncertain hearts, stepping into the docking tube that connected them to the battleship's interior. The first impression was of scale. Everything about the human corridor was designed for beings somewhat taller and bulkier. The ceilings loomed higher than on any Xenorian ship. Lights glowed from recessed panels in the walls, casting gentle illumination. Kesser's gaze darted around, noting the elegant mixture of aesthetics and function. Finally, they encountered their welcoming party, 5 humans in matching uniforms. Lieutenant Marcus Lane was among them, a slight grin on his face as he held out a hand in a gesture Kesser had never seen before. She studied these strange mammals. Upright stance, mostly hairless except for the top of their heads, which varied in color and texture, soft faces with small eyes compared to Xenorian vision. Even more intriguing was the vast array of digital readouts on handheld devices they carried, more advanced than anything the Xenorians had. A tall woman with dark hair stepped forward. "Greetings, Captain Kesser. I am Commander Elisander Fowler of the Resolute Dawn. Our records show you are in dire need of repairs. We can assist." Kesser clacked her beak softly in a show of politeness. "We are grateful. Your vessel is beyond what we have ever seen. I must ask, though, why help us? Are you expecting something in return?" Her translator device worked diligently, but traces of doubt still bled through in the Xenorian's tone. Commander Fowler exchanged a glance with Lane, then shook her head. "We're part of a larger network of worlds united by the principle that mutual cooperation benefits us all. We don't charge a fee for humanitarian aid. That said, once we stabilize your ship, we might discuss future arrangements, perhaps a formal alliance if your people are so inclined. But for now, let us help." Kesser noticed how calm Fowler's voice sounded, how assured. It was not the voice of a greedy pirate or conqueror. She sensed sincerity in the woman's gaze. "Then we accept," Kesser replied. They followed the humans deeper into the corridor, marveling at the sheer complexity of the place. Occasional windows offered glimpses into the cavernous interior of the hangar. There were drones carrying out maintenance, engineers in exosuits welding or calibrating. In the distance, separate bays housed smaller craft of sleek design, each dwarfed by the colossal structure. Xenorian tradition prized physically touching one's technology, but these humans seemed to orchestrate tasks from distances using elaborate consoles and holographic projections. They were escorted to an observation deck adjacent to a large repair bay. Fowler and Lane explained that they had dispatched specialized teams to diagnose the Aurora's wing. Kesser's crest feathers bristled slightly at the notion of strangers rummaging through her beloved ship, but the alternative was to let her crew drift powerless in space. Through the observation window, she could see mechanical arms extending from the walls, scanning the hull plating. A series of readouts on a nearby panel displayed the real-time analysis: microfractures, failing environmental seals, reactor inefficiencies. Even Tech Priest Nowell, typically suspicious, whispered a breathy note of awe as he realized how thorough the scans were. In less than an hour, the human engineers had compiled a complete blueprint of the Aurora's wing structure and the damage sustained. This would have taken a Xenorian repair yard days of manual inspection to accomplish. Kesser felt a stirring of gratitude, though it was tempered by an undercurrent of fear. What else could these humans do if they turned hostile? She banished the thought for the moment, reminding herself that they had not shown any sign of aggression. A young human engineer named Lucas Tan approached the Xenorian group, carrying a slim tablet with flickering holographic icons. "Captain, I've looked over your frigate schematics," he began, though he fidgeted slightly in front of these alien visitors. "I see that your life support systems are near collapse, and your drive core is dangerously close to meltdown if it's not repaired. Our facility can fabricate replacement parts. We'll have to reinforce some structural areas, or your next jump could tear the hull apart." Nowell ruffled his aged feathers. "Reinforcements? Would that mean altering the hull shape? Our people believe in a specific curvature to maintain flight synergy, even in vacuum." Dan blinked, hesitating. Fowler gave him an encouraging nod. "We can respect your design principles," Tan assured them. "We just need to ensure the hull integrity meets minimum safety requirements. I can replicate plating that mimics your design while still adding the necessary strength." Crew, the lingering behind Kessler, asked, "Why go to such trouble just to accommodate our traditions?" The question reflected their deeply ingrained suspicion. Tan's chiragd, "Because it's your ship. We're not here to strip away your identity, only to help get you safely back in operation." Those simple words made Kessler glance at her second-in-command with a small note of relief. Maybe these humans truly meant no harm. Commander Fowler then guided them into a wide corridor with a gently curving floor. She explained that the Resolute Dawn was equipped with artificial gravity fields carefully calibrated for human physiology, but they could adjust local grav plating if Xenorian biology required something slightly different. The corridor itself seemed endless, with doors branching off to various sections: living quarters, medical stations, armories. They passed through a large transparent section that gave a startling view of the star-speckled vacuum, the silent domain where the battleship stood guard. The Aurora's wing looked so small and fragile. From this vantage, eventually, the party arrived in a lounge area with seats shaped surprisingly close to Xenorian proportions. Additional drone activity swarmed around them as Fowler invited everyone to rest. "We'll give you a tour if you like, or you can observe the repairs in detail. In the meantime, I believe your crew might need medical assistance. We have an excellent infirmary on Deck 7. Our staff can handle a wide range of xenobiology." Kessler nodded, admiring how well-organized these humans were. She also couldn't help noticing the minor differences in their posture, how they expressed emotion with subtle facial shifts rather than feather motions. It was fascinating in a way she had never anticipated. To move forward with mutual trust, Kessler decided to see how the medical team handled one of her wounded crew members. She signaled for the group to follow Fowler. They traversed yet another corridor that led to the infirmary. Unlike the austere, cramped medical bays Kessler was used to, this facility spread out with multiple specialized stations. The walls glowed softly with readouts, and a subtle hush pervaded the area. Within minutes, a pair of human medics approached, scanning a severely injured Xenorian with handheld devices. Their manner was calm, gentle, though the technology they wielded was extraordinary. Kessler watched the process, uneasy yet transfixed. Normally, Xenorian doctors would physically examine the patient with various mechanical instruments, perhaps aided by minimal digital readouts. The humans here seem to do everything with these integrated scanners, with real-time data about blood composition, organ function, neural signals. The lead medic, a short, dark-haired woman named Dr. Lien, looked over the results. She explained how they would stabilize the Xenorian's broken wing limb and seal internal injuries with something called biofoam. Though her accent was thick, the translator conveyed the clinical confidence in her voice. The entire procedure took far less time than a Xenorian medical intervention would. By the end, Kessler felt an unspoken wave of gratitude pass through her. If the humans wanted to exploit them, they had every chance. Yet here they were, saving lives. She was beginning to understand that perhaps this towering battleship and its formidable crew were guided by something other than conquest. She offered Dr. Lien and Commander Fowler a respectful bow, or the closest Xenorian equivalent, which involved extending her crest feathers in a flattened sign of appreciation. The humans seemed to interpret the gesture well enough and gave a courteous nod in return. Outside the infirmary, Tech Priest Nowell's gaze roamed the corridor, lingering on every advanced console. He muttered something about spirits of machines far surpassing our own. Crew the gently reminded him not to forget that these were still mortal creations. Nowell conceded the point, though he couldn't deny the awe he felt. They continued their brief tour. Commander Fowler led them past security stations, where human Marines in neat uniform saluted. Through more windows, they glimpsed multiple fighter craft stored in recessed hangars, each armed with weaponry that dwarfed the Aurora's wings' meager array. Kesser's heart pounded each time she imagined the destructive potential. She recalled the raiders who had so badly damaged her own frigate. These humans could surely vaporize such threats in an instant if their technology was half as powerful as it looked. As the group pressed on, Fowler's communicator beeped. She spoke quietly into it, then turned to Kesser. "Captain, the Resolute Dawn's scanning net has detected incoming vessels on a fast approach vector. They're not broadcasting friendly signals. We believe they may be your pursuers." Kesser stiffened. The worst scenario had arrived. The raiders, or possibly a more aggressive faction, had tracked them here. They might be out to claim salvage rights or exact revenge on the Xenorians. But now they faced not just the Aurora's wing. There was an entire human battleship. She felt an odd mixture of dread and relief. Fowler beckoned them to follow. "I'd like to invite you to our bridge. You can see for yourselves how we handle such encounters." Kesser hesitated only briefly before nodding. They followed the commander into a large, cylindrical lift that traveled smoothly upward through the warship's central spine. The view screens in the lift offered real-time images of the battleship's interior architecture. Gleaming corridors, power conduits pulsating with energy, entire decks dedicated to various missions. Research, intelligence, drone control, even recreational areas. It was more than Kesser could fathom. When the doors slid open, they emerged onto the command bridge, a vast space featuring tiered stations manned by dozens of human operators. At the center rose a platform with a panoramic display of stars. Overhead, hollow projections traced the positions of the incoming threat, as well as other distant signatures. Commander Fowler introduced them to Captain Adrian Sager, the overall commanding officer of the Resolute Dawn. He was tall, older, with silver in his hair and a calm, measured demeanor that exuded authority. "Captain Kesser, I understand you have trouble on your tail," he said simply. She nodded. "Yes, these are likely the Vishala marauders who attacked us. They are vicious and relentless, but they typically rely on outnumbering smaller ships." A flicker of grim amusement crossed Sager's face. "They will find no easy target here. Lieutenant, open a channel." At his command, the overhead screen changed to reveal the faces of the marauders. Kesser recognized their scaly features, the sneer of their leader known as High Claw Vorch. He gloated, demanding that the Aurora's wing be turned over or destroyed. Sager allowed the alien to rant for a few seconds, wearing an impassive expression. When Vorch paused for breath, Sager's quiet voice spoke with chilling confidence. "You will stand down. The Xenorians aboard our vessel are under our protection. If you do not withdraw, we will treat you as hostile intruders." A burst of mocking laughter echoed from the marauders, and then Vorch delivered a harsh threat. "One battleship or 100, it makes no difference. We will claim the heads of these bird beings and the spoils of your wreckage too." Sager simply nodded at the communications officer, who severed the link. Kesser felt her stomach tighten. Marauders rarely bluff. They would attack if they believed they had the advantage. She braced herself for the possibility that this entire section of space would erupt into a firefight. Crew placed a gentle hand on Kesser's shoulder, both of them expecting the worst. But Sager, with a slow, almost bored wave of his hand, issued a tactical order. The Resolute Dawn's operators murmured acknowledgments, pressing subtle keys on displays. A hush settled on the bridge. In the next instant, a bright beam lanced out from somewhere along the battleship's starboard array. On the overhead tactical feed, they watched the marauder vessels, a cluster of half a dozen frigates, as one of them vanished from the redoubt in a sudden flare of energy. On the main screen, the feed from an external camera showed a brilliant explosion that consumed the hostile ship in a matter of seconds. The rest of Vorch's fleet hesitated, apparently reeling from the shock. Kesser's breath caught in her throat. She had never witnessed such immediate destructive force. Captain Sagar spoke softly, as though it were routine. "Vorch, you've lost one ship. Would you like to reconsider your position?" A new comm channel opened. Vorch's face appeared again, twisted with rage, fear lurking in his eyes. The prideful snarl of the marauders had diminished. Sagar continued in that same calm voice. "Your next move is up to you. Engage us, and I can promise you'll lose more." Silence reigned. Kesser could almost see Vorch calculating the odds. The feed cut abruptly. Sensor logs showed the marauder ships turning away, engines flaring as they exited on a desperate burn. The tension in the bridge dissipated. Several human officers exhaled in relief, while others simply returned to standard operating tasks. Kesser's mouth went dry. She had known the humans were powerful, but to witness it firsthand was overwhelming. Beside her, Krutha shook her head in silent astonishment, and Nowell's feathers rustled with anxiety. The marauders had fled, leaving the Aurora's wing unscathed. It felt like stepping from the brink of certain doom onto solid ground. With a respectful dip of her head, Kesser addressed Captain Sagar. "We owe you a debt of gratitude. If it weren't for your timely intervention, we likely would have been destroyed." Sagar offered a polite nod. "Protecting innocent travelers is part of our mandate, Captain. There is no debt, but we would welcome discussions about future cooperation once your ship is fully repaired." Fowler gestured for them to follow her away from the center of the bridge so that normal operations could resume. They ended up in a side briefing room with large windows overlooking the cosmos. Kesser could see the faint glow of the retreating marauders' engine trails in the distance. Inside that conference room, a few human officers arranged refreshments of water and something called coffee, which smelled bitter but interesting. The Xenorians politely declined, uncertain of the beverage's compatibility with their biology. Commander Fowler gently placed her hands on the metal table. "We don't expect you to make decisions right away, but we want you to know that Earth Stellar Command has encountered many hostile forces and has built alliances with various peaceful species. We'd like to extend that invitation to the Xenorians." Krutha looked uncertain, but Tech Priest Nowell, surprising them, nodded in cautious approval. He murmured something about forging bonds that could help them evolve beyond their own limitations. Kesser took a moment to gather her thoughts. "We are far from our home territory. Our council might require official negotiations. Yet I can see your advanced technology and sense your moral stance. We could benefit from mutual exchange. Our traditions do not forbid external alliances, but we have always insisted on our autonomy and the sanctity of our warrior culture." Fowler's eyes flickered in understanding. "We've observed a number of species with strong warrior traditions. We do not seek to strip your identity. We only ask that any alliance be based on mutual respect and cooperation." Kesser nodded, appreciating the clarity. It occurred to her that they were witnessing not just the might of a giant warship, but also the subtlety of civilization that believed in forging true partnerships. They parted ways for the evening, if one could call it that, in the timeless void of space. The humans offered guest quarters to the Xenorians within a pressurized habitat zone adjusted for their comfort. It felt too luxurious compared to the cramped bunks aboard the Aurora's wing. Each Xenorian had a modest private space with adjustable temperature and humidity settings. Kesser, unsettled by the quiet, found herself pacing the confines of her room, struggling with the enormity of the day's events. Eventually, she settled, reflecting on how swiftly events had unfolded, from the brink of doom to a possible alliance. The next day, as her ship underwent further repairs, Kesser led Krutha and Tech Priest Nowell through the labyrinthine corridors of the Resolute Dawn. They saw the medical staff continuing to treat wounded Xenorians, and the engineering teams forging custom alloy plates to reinforce the Aurora's wing. Each step revealed fresh wonders: a research deck with suspended specimens from various star systems, A horticultural bay with earth plant life grown in specialized domes, a massive communal cafeteria bustling with off-duty crew. The scale of everything was humbling. One human engineer excitedly showed Nowell a new interface that allowed partial tactile feedback through advanced haptic sensors, bridging the gap between digital controls and the Xenorian preference for mechanical toggles. Nowell studied it with rapt attention, muttering about future integration possibilities for Xenorian vessels. The more they explored, the more Kessler saw glimpses of a society that embraced myriad solutions. A small group of crew members offered kind greetings, curious about the avian features of the Xenorians. Some exchanged stories of their own species' home planets. It was a swirl of exchange that Kessler had never imagined possible in a single warship. By mid-shift, a final progress update arrived on her personal comm unit. The humans had nearly finished the major reinforcements and begun calibrating the Aurora's Wings reactor with newly replicated components. Kessler hurried to the docking bay, heart fluttering with anticipation. There, she saw her once-damaged frigate secured on a large platform. Teams of drones finished sealing hull plates. Fresh plating gleamed, shaped with respect for the original curves. Even from a distance, she could tell it was an improvement over anything she had hoped for. Crew ran a diagnostic and confirmed that the ship's structural integrity had reached levels they had never before attained. As Kessler spoke with the lead engineer, Commander Fowler arrived with Captain Sagar in tow. Sagar congratulated them on the completion of repairs, explaining that although they had done the work without demanding payment, they would be delighted if the Xenorians considered broader cooperation. Fowler handed Kessler a data crystal containing the design schematics used for the repairs, ensuring that the Xenorians could replicate them at home. It was a startling gesture of generosity, especially from a warship that could have easily withheld such technical knowledge. Kessler thought about how her people would react, especially those in the council who viewed outside powers with suspicion. She could already hear the voices. Are we beholden to these humans now? Have we bartered away our sovereignty? Yet the reality was that she had not pledged anything. The humans had helped them out of principle, not extortion. She caught Sagar's gaze, trying to read him. His demeanor was consistently measured, suggesting earnestness. She cleared her throat, resisting the urge to flare her feathers in agitation. "We owe you more than we can express," she said finally. "I cannot decide alone how our entire civilization will proceed, but I will deliver the truth of your generosity to our leaders. I expect they will be very interested in discussions." Sagar inclined his head. "That's all we ask, Captain. We want to ensure peaceful coexistence. If we can share knowledge, trade routes, or cultural understanding, that's to everyone's benefit." Their conversation ended on that promise. The Xenorian landing party returned to the Aurora's Wing. For a while, they inspected the updated systems. Nowell marveled at the improved efficiency in the reactor core. Crew attested the new hull sensors. All throughout the ship, crew members were abuzz with excitement, many speaking of how the humans had treated them kindly in the infirmary, the lounge areas, or the engineering bays. Time came to depart. The docking clamps released. In the main cockpit, Kessler and her officers took their posts. Systems hummed with new life. The main screen showed the vast hangar doors sliding open, revealing the star-strewn expanse beyond. With a gentle push on mechanical thrusters, the Aurora's Wing lifted from the platform. Commander Fowler's voice came over the comm once more, offering final departure instructions. Kessler responded with a heartfelt thanks, then guided the frigate toward the vacuum of open space. As they crossed the threshold into the black, they caught one last look at the Resolute Dawn. It hung like a titan in orbit, bristling with unimaginable firepower, yet somehow exuding a protective presence. Kessler's breath wavered. "Look at it," she murmured, loud enough for the crew to hear. "That entire battleship, it dwarfs anything we've known." Crew nodded, a flicker of renewed awe passing across her gaze. Nowell hunched over a console, whispering quiet words of amazement. The moment encapsulated their entire experience: fear, gratitude, astonishment. After the Aurora's wing cleared the perimeter, they set a course for Xenorian space. Her people waited, likely anxious for news, assuming the Aurora's wing would even return. Kessler composed a preliminary report in her head, uncertain how the Council would react to learning of a species capable of disintegrating an enemy vessel with a single beam. Yet she believed, down to her bones, that these humans were not aggressors seeking to subjugate them. They had proven that they fought only in defense or to uphold some principle of universal protection. This was a notion somewhat alien to Xenorian ways, which often revolved around honorable combat and ritual. But it was not incompatible. In her private cabin, Kessler took a moment to run a hand across the newly installed console. She could sense the synergy between the old mechanical triggers of her people's design and the sophisticated components the humans had integrated. Somehow, they had found a respectful compromise. She paused to consider that same metaphor for the future of their relationship with Earth. Perhaps, just like these console upgrades, they could discover a way to fuse traditions and innovations, forging a beneficial path forward. She thought of Commander Fowler's earnest tone, of Captain Sagar's calm resolve, of the kindness shown by the engineers and medics. Such moments weighed heavily on her, transforming her sense of the galaxy. Although the Aurora's wing was still traveling at sublight speed for the moment, preparing for its next FTL jump, Kessler used the lull to gather her senior staff. They had to discuss the plan, how to approach the Council, what to disclose, what alliances might form. She opened the discussion, half expecting an outpouring of doubts. Yet she found the majority had been swayed by what they'd seen. Even the staunchest traditionalists recognized the human's moral code and the strategic advantage of friendship. A lively debate followed, but it was a debate about how best to proceed, not about whether to proceed. More than once, someone joked that if they refused to befriend the humans, they'd simply be missing out on the most powerful potential ally in the known galaxy. At last, the time came to run the new jump drive calibration. The frigate's energy signature pulsed in the navigational array. Crew handled the final checks, verifying that the components matched the Xenorian star charts. Nalo offered a brief prayer to the old flight spirits of their race, ensuring a safe path among the stars. Kessler settled into her captain's seat, feeling the subtle shift in gravity as the FTL spool-up began. With a measured breath, she gave the order. The Aurora's wing vanished into a shimmering corridor of faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the monstrous shape of the Resolute Dawn. During the journey home, Kessler faced an onslaught of emotions. She recalled the first time she saw the battleship looming out of darkness, the raw awe that nearly took her breath away. She considered how swiftly everything had changed. One moment they were lost and hunted. The next, they found themselves under the protection of a star-faring civilization far beyond their imagination. It felt almost like a dream, but every new hum of the improved systems reminded her that it was real. The future now seemed filled with possibilities for the Xenorians. If the Council accepted an alliance, it could herald a new era of exchange, technology, art, and maybe a reevaluation of their own traditions. When finally they dropped out of FTL near the outskirts of Xenorian space, the scanners picked up the familiar pattern of their border beacons. Kessler sighed in relief. They were home, or close enough to it to feel secure. She opened a secure channel to the local station, announcing their arrival and requesting immediate docking for official debrief. Initial shock came through the comms. The station staff had assumed the Aurora's wing lost, yet they quickly prepared to receive them. As the frigate approached the Xenorian starport, Kessler gazed at the busy docks, noticing how small and utilitarian they seemed in comparison to the sleek, gargantuan structure of the Resolute Dawn. Later that day, Kessler stood in the central meeting hall of the station, relaying her account to a contingent of Xenorian officials. The reaction was unsurprisingly skeptical at first, but the evidence was irrefutable. The repaired systems, the schematics, the eyewitness testimonies from her crew. Word spread fast. Within hours, the talk of a massive human battleship brimming with unstoppable might had become the station's prime rumor, and most believed it with wide-eyed wonder. Some worried about potential colonization. Others saw an opportunity to forge a strong bond. Curiosity and excitement bubbled everywhere, echoing the same mixture of fear and respect Kessler herself had felt aboard the Resolute Dawn. One day stretched into several as Kessler remained at the station, coordinating final repairs and restocking her frigate. Envoys from the capital demanded she travel there to present her findings to the highest council. She suspected the humans would also soon send representatives if they were as interested in diplomacy as they claimed. Throughout it all, Kessler retained an unshakable memory of that colossal silhouette floating in the void, an ultimate symbol of how small her people's world once seemed and how wide the galaxy truly was. At night, resting in guest quarters on the station, she found her mind drifting back to the moment on the Resolute Dawn's bridge when a single beam had annihilated an enemy ship. Such destructive force could have been used to rule through fear, yet the humans seemed guided by principle. She clung to that notion of moral restraint, telling herself that if such a power existed, it was better it be in the hands of those who would wield it judiciously. The synergy between Xenorian tradition and human innovation felt like a story only just beginning. When the Aurora's wing was once again ready to fly, Kessler took a short trip to her homeworld, an azure planet with sprawling cliffs and floating cities drifting on updrafts of warm air. Her people had always taken pride in flight, even though many now lived in orbital stations. She had lived in space most of her adult life, rarely returning. But after the events with the humans, she felt the tug of heritage more strongly than ever. She landed near a grand hall, perched at the edge of a dramatic canyon. There, she would testify before the Great Council of Feathers, the assembly that decided the foreign policy for the Xenorians. The hearing was intense. Council elders fired question after question about the humans, their weaponry, their motivations, the scale of that battleship. Some elders expressed immediate enthusiasm for forging an alliance, reasoning that it would protect the Xenorians from marauders, pirates, and other threats. Others worried that the humans might eventually expect tribute or might overshadow the Xenorians' unique culture. Through it all, Kessler held her ground, speaking honestly about how they had saved her ship without demanding anything in return. She recounted the thorough repairs, the advanced medical care, the willingness to adapt to Xenorian tradition. The council listened, rapt. By the end, a consensus formed that at the very least, a diplomatic mission should be arranged to meet with the humans. Kessler's report concluded. She felt relief flood her system. She had fulfilled her duty, and now the future was in the hands of the council. Yet she couldn't deny that a part of her was eager to return, to once again witness that unimaginable vessel and the creatures who commanded it. Something in her spirit had awakened out there. For centuries, the Xenorians thought themselves advanced. Now they realized how much further there was to go. And they also realized that friendship with such a power could open gateways to countless discoveries, new alliances, and shared prosperity. Sometime before dawn, Kessler found herself perched on a balcony overlooking the luminous canyons of her homeworld. Wind currents lifted the faint glow of bioluminescent flora scattered across the cliffs. She reflected on the once frightening stories of mythical human battleships. The reality had proven more complex, both more intimidating in raw power and more hopeful in moral compass. She thought of Commander Fowler and Captain Sagar, how they'd seemed so calm amidst technology that could flatten entire fleets. She thought of the smaller human crew members, people like Lucas Tan, who had shown such curiosity and compassion in bridging the gap between their cultures. In the quiet solitude, she spread her arms and let the breeze rustle her feathered cloak. In that moment, she believed that the Xenorians had turned a page in their history. They had glimpsed a force that dwarfed even their wildest imaginings, but found that the ones who controlled it did not fit the old narratives of conquest and subjugation. Rather, the humans seemed almost eager to reach out and cooperate, to stand with them against common threats. It was a moment of epiphany for Kessler, realizing that a new chapter lay ahead, one where her people might soar higher than ever, carried on wings not of blind tradition, but of open-minded collaboration. Soon enough, dawn arrived in the sky above the canyons. Kessler watched the swirl of gold and pale blue light. She wondered if the humans had a similar sunrise on their home planet, Earth. Was it different? Did their sun flare with a different hue? The idea that they might share the same quiet awe at the start of each day comforted her, and she smiled to herself, imagining a day when the Xenorian and human peoples might stand side by side, exploring the cosmos together, forging alliances, and writing a new story of unity. Deep down, she was convinced that after witnessing the resolute dawn, no one among her people would ever doubt the scale of possibility again. The galaxy was vast, indeed, but not all giants were monsters. And sometimes, the mightiest fortress in the void could also be the warmest beacon of hope.